Title: The Bloomwalker's Bargain. Year: 115 million. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. Ashes Beneath the Bloom. The dust had not yet settled from the last excavation when Mara went to retrieve the withered vine, coiled like a sleeping serpent, dry and forgotten in the shadow of the ruins. Her expedition crew watched her with practiced indifference, unaware that she saw things others could not. The vine pulsed once in her hand. The sight is dead. The foreman grumbled behind her. There's nothing left here but ghosts in dried soil. That's where truth begins, Mara whispered. She wrapped the vine carefully and tucked it into the inner pocket of her coat. Beneath the city of stone, her father's voice echoed from years gone. Don't chase myths, Mara. You'll lose your way. But Mara had already lost it along with everything else that once rooted her. She wasn't digging for history. She was digging for herself. Chapter 2. The Pilgrim's Fire. Flames roared in the valley as the team ignited a perimeter to push back the encroaching frost rot. The once green valley wilted under industrial greed, and Mara watched from the ridge, arms crossed, brow heavy. She had worn them. The vine had worn her. The Bloomwalker, if such a being existed, had once walked these valleys, healing by touch, purging by fire. Legend said he burned by choice, not pain. That power could be summoned again, but not without price. Mara stood barefoot on sacred rock, the vine now glowing gently in her palm. Let the bloom burn, she intoned, echoing the ancient rite. Fire answered, not from the match, but from the earth itself. Chapter 3. Stone, not soil. The crew abandoned the dig. What remained was Mara and the growing spire of flame. Fed bloom where ash once reigned. The stone beneath her feet warmed, not scorched, not charred, but welcomed. She stood atop the ruined altar, the Bloomwalker's memories crowding her own. She saw his regrets, how ambition without compassion twisted his legacy. She saw her own mirrored in that truth. As dawn touched the valley, Mara lowered herself beside the bloom and let it curl around her hand once more. To grow, to lead, to change the path wasn't forward. It was downward, into the roots, into the remembering. She did not walk away. She bloomed. Title: The Time Bender. Year: 114,871,794.4. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. And the Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. Beneath the grinding gears of the subterranean city of Varn, hidden far beneath the eastern stones of Ondath, the Time Bender stalked the corridors of fractured memory. He was not a scientist, nor a mystic, but something forged between both, one who unraveled and rewound events in search of truth, even at the cost of his own certainty. Varn was a haven for thinkers too bold or broken to remain above ground. Its society prized intellect, but over the years, intellect had curdled into arrogance. Debates became dogma. Certainty replaced curiosity. The Time Bender had returned to the city of his exile with a message only few were prepared to hear. Sometimes the only way out is to descend inward and claim what's hidden. Waiting for him was the uncrowned king, a former ruler deposed for questioning too much. Together they would confront the city's greatest illusion, its belief that it had nothing left to learn. Chapter 2. Within the echo vaults of Varn, knowledge was stored in liquid threads of memory, suspended in crystal and vials. Scholars, wearing pride like armor, gathered to mock the Time Bender's warning. What you seek is obsolete, said one. The truth is already known. Then why does it keep escaping you? He answered coldly. The Time Bender stepped into the archive's deepest chamber and shattered his own memory. It's read upon the floor. Light and sound burst forth, scenes of failure, loss, hubris, humility, his own descent into ignorance laid bare. He turned to them. I forgot myself to remember the truth. Will you do the same? The silence that followed trembled. Chapter 3. The uncrowned king led a gathering of dissenters' young minds hungry for honest inquiry. With the Time Bender beside him, they initiated a ritual long forbidden, a descent inward. It was a trial of memory and ego, one that forced each participant to witness their misconceptions laid bare. As they emerged, broken and wiser, Varn began to shift. The arrogant retreated. The humble rose. Even those who had once scorned the Time Bender now looked to him with wary respect. At dawn, the Time Bender stood at the city's highest spire, overlooking the descent he had once feared. The uncrowned king joined him, not as a ruler, but as a brother in truth. We still know so little, the king said. That's what makes us ready, the Time Bender replied. And beneath the grinding gears of Varn, a new era turned a cycle driven not by certainty, but by the quiet strength of humility. Title: The Starless Flame. Year: 114,743,589.7. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the cliffside city of Marth, where crystalline spires glowed like tethered lightning, and the air shimmered with charged energy. The starless flame kept her vigil. She was no myth, though she moved like one, a being born from collapse, shaped in silence, and marked by fire that had never known light. She did not fly, she did not dazzle, but where she walked, the falsehoods burned away. The people of Maru celebrated invention, personal ascension, and the glory of individual power. At deep beneath the foundations of the city, an ancient vault pulsed with neglected energy power harvested not from the earth, but from the quiet suffering of the forgotten. The flame stood at its edge, hands outstretched, whispering the warning. Each time truth outpaces comfort, another illusion yields to the flame, and the illusion of Maru's peace was about to catch fire. Chapter 2. The Grave. So appeared as the city convened its annual festival of Rise, a celebration of ego masquerading as progress, clad in dark robes stitched from ancestral bones. He walked among the revelers, planting questions like seeds. What was sacrificed to make this marvel? What was forgotten while you remembered yourselves? Few listened. The starless flame confronted him not with fury, but understanding. She had once tried to burn the vault only to see it rebuild itself, brick by brick, thinned by the very people that harmed. We must choose together, she told him, not against each other. And if they won't choose, the great sower asked, then we show them what balance feels like. Chapter 3. As night fell, the tremor shook Maru. From the vault surged cries, echoes of unacknowledged burdens. Generations of toil repressed beneath city stone. The starless flame stood at the center of the plaza, glowing not with heat, but with resolve. She addressed the people, her voice calm and unyielding. You have built in your image. Now look at the parts of yourself you've buried. The vault split open not in destruction, but in revelation. Inside were not monsters, but memories, forgotten workers, ancestors' faces, old hands that once built what had been claimed by a newer generation. Tears followed silence. Then came change. The flame stepped back, her work done. The grave sower offered her a nod. Balance, then. Balance, she agreed. Maru endured, not because it was forced to, but because it learned to carry both personal dreams and communal memory. And above the vault, a new tower was built, half open to the stars, half rooted in the ground. Where illusion had ruled, truth now guided, and in that balance the starless flame flickered on. Title: The Dusk-Bound Twin. Year: 114,615,384.2. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. Beyond the outer shell of the ruined moon Ultra, where broken satellites drift in silence and starlight no longer reached, the dust-bound twin floated within her pod, eyes closed and heart open. She was engineered to feel deeply, a gift and a curse in a world that had long replaced empathy with efficiency. Her sister, the starless flame, had once been her mirror in flesh and thought, but war fractured their bond. Now one remained in orbit, and the other lost somewhere within the wounded colonies below. The twins' mission was simple: recover the data, but her heart whispered a deeper purpose: heal what had been severed. The transmission came like a heartbeat, faint, erratic, unmistakably hers. Knowing yourself is when you bless both wound and wonder, the twin murmured, setting her vessel into descent. Chapter 2. She landed at Outpost D7, a place long declared lifeless. There, among rusted hulls and shattered glass, she found echoes, recordings, writings, broken dreams, all bearing her sister's voice, though changed, softer, more human. A message played. They told me kindness was obsolete, that healing came from force. But I remember your touch, your silence, your stubborn warmth. The dusk-bound twin followed these breadcrumbs deeper into the colony's heart. Each act of kindness her sister had performed left behind traces not in data, but in transformed lives. A medic save, a ration shared, a poem left in an empty bunk. And then at the central core she found her. The starless flame, older, wearied, but alive. Scar ran across her face, a wound that matched the break in their history. Chapter 3. The reunion was quiet. No dramatic embrace, only the gaze of two who had once been one, acknowledging the weight of time, pain, and survival. I thought you hated me, the starless flame said. If I had to, the twin replied, but the data says otherwise. She smiled faintly. You healed them. You healed yourself. I tried. And now I'm here to remind you succeeded. Together they reignited the colony core, not just its power, but its spirit. They rebuilt not from plans or protocol, but from small human acts, listening, forgiving, working side by side. Word of the restored colony spread like a quiet miracle, not a triumph of technology, but of tenderness. The dust-bound twin logged her final entry. Kindness does not erase the past, but its stitches it closed, and beside her the starless flame lit a beacon for others, proof that even in the darkest drift, healing was possible. Together they blessed both wound and wonder. Title: The Blind Poet. Year: 114,487,179.4. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The city of Kalna was built in rings, each layer more refined, more resourced, more removed. At its center stood the Hall of Suns, where wealth shimmered and silence prevailed. At its edges, the Hall of Sun district languished in shadows, its people forgotten but not broken. Among them lived the blind poet, a figure cloaked in ash-colored robes. His eyes failed not by weakness but by vow. He had seen too much, and in his sightlessness found vision. His words held power, his presence lent strength. Each evening he stood on cracked stone near the broken aqueduct and spoke verses to a crowd that grew slowly, painfully, faithfully. "The strength you seek," he whispered, "is already watching from the other side of the challenge." And the quiet moments after, the people remembered who they were and began to wonder who they could become. Chapter 2. The poet's influence began to ripple. Gardens sprouted in abandoned lots. Children shared dreams without fear. Elderly hands wove fabrics bearing glyphs of hope. In a city fractured by design, the hollow sun began to shine with a different kind of light. But progress stirred resistance. From the gilded center came the city's emissary, the hollow sun, a superhero sculpted by policy and propaganda, tasked with maintaining order through carefully dispensed acts of mercy. She came not to listen, but to remind. The poet awakens chaos, she warned. No, the people replied, he awakens us. The hollow sun found him in the square. You erode stability, she accused. I offer roots, he answered, and roots don't fear storms. Chapter 3. Tension grew. The poet challenged the city's core not through force, but through unity. His words connected lives, linked dreams, bound fates. Even the hollow sun felt her edges crumble as she watched her influence wane, replaced not by rebellion, but renewal. Finally she came again, not to confront, but to sit beside him. I was born of light, she confessed, but I've never felt its warmth. The poet reached for her hand. Then share the warmth you seek, let it grow where it is needed most. Together they spoke to the people, one with verse, one with presence. Kalna's rings began to blur. Resources flowed outward, wisdom flowed inward. Barriers became bridges. Personal growth bloomed not in isolation, but in harmony. And as the hollow sun shed her name to live among the people, the blind poet smiled softly behind his veil. He had never needed sight to see a future worth building. Title: The Ashland Prophet. Year: 114,358,973.9. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The city of Kalna, once radiant with golden towers and clean skies, now choked on its own progress. Smog twisted through alleyways like forgotten oaths, and the once mighty infrastructure groaned under the weight of its unchecked ambition. In the heart of this decay stood the Ashland Prophet, a hero who had once breathed freely but now bore the price of the city's carelessness. His lungs scorched by a chemical catastrophe he had prevented too late, hissed with every breath. He spoke little, not for lack of wisdom, but to preserve what strength remained. He moved for tell not in fanfare, but in ritual training daily, meditating nightly, observing patterns that others ignored. He had learned the sacred rhythm of discipline, the patience of those who endure it not for glory, but for transformation. Ignore the tremor too long, he whispered into the dark, and it becomes the ground you walk on. Chapter 2. Trouble stirred in Talon's underbelly. A new threat emerged, the last thorn of summer, a charismatic robe with the power to disrupt memory itself. She promised freedom from guilt and structure, a chaotic liberation that appealed to the weary masses. The prophet watched her influence spread like wildfire, quick, enticing, and ruinous. Without discipline, people abandoned their duties, neglecting the foundations of the fragile city. Towers once sturdy began to tilt, bridges cracked. He confronted her at the memory pit, where stolen recollections swirled like smoke. You offer escape, he rasped, but not redemption. I'd offer release, she smiled. You bind them in chains of habit. Discipline isn't a chain, he replied. It's the spine of freedom. Chapter 3. With the city teetering, the prophet made his stand not in combat, but by invoking the forgotten rite, the circle of resolve. An ancient ritual, it demanded participants strip away illusion, comfort, and distraction. Only those who endured its fire would awaken with clarity. He lit the beacon and waited. Few came at first, then dozens, then hundreds. Some broke and fled. Others wept and stood firm. Even the last thorn came, intrigued by his silence. She watched as Talon's citizens rekindled their forgotten strength not with superpowers, but with presence, restraint, and resolve. When the ritual ended, the prophet collapsed, spent but fulfilled. Around him, Talon shimmered anew, not fixed, but grounded. The last thorn knelt beside him, whispering, "Perhaps you were right. Perhaps what breaks us also remakes us." He opened one weary eye. "Only if we're willing to rise each morning and choose to work again." And so Talon endured, not because of might, but because of self-discipline, taught by the hero who walked through ash and whispered truth into trembling ground. Title: The Hunger That Wakes. Year: 114,230,769.1. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan and the Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The city of Varnak had not heard truth in a generation. Built beneath domes of illusion, it gleamed with peace, order, and compliance, but below its surface pulsed a quiet rot. Truth was not forbidden. It was simply avoided. At the edge of a waste, where synthetic grass curled into glass, guard dust, the hunger that wakes moved like rumor, a figure wrapped in patchwork and hunger, not for food, but for revelation. She had once been a citizen. She had once swallowed the lie. Now she walked to stir the bones of silence. Every step taken in truth becomes a tool of transformation, she said as she crossed into the perimeter of Zone Black, where no light touched by decree. She wasn't alone. Chapter 2. The spirit of the wild emerged from the ruins of the outer wards, feral mind in a human form. He knew truth not as thought, but instinct. They did not speak much. They didn't need to. Where she uncovered, he disrupted. Together they slipped into the underquarters of Varnak. They found smiles stretched too tight, family performing harmony like fear. No one asked questions. No one looked long enough to see, until the hunger placed her hand on a child's shoulder and asked, "Do you know what you're afraid of?" The child answered with a tear and a nod. At night, a wall cracked not of stone, but of culture. Chapter 3. The Dome Elder summoned them, not for punishment, but for reprogramming. "You are disrupting equilibrium," they said. "No," she answered. "We are inviting transformation." The spirit of the wild growled low. Round them, a growing crowd formed, people who had tasted discomfort and found it purer than the lies they'd been fed. They did not fight. They revealed, story after story, wound after wound. Truth poured like cleansing rain. The domes flickered. The illusions began to fray. And Varnak woke. Its people faced harsh truths. Exploitation beneath order. Injustice behind smiles. Weakness clothed as tradition. But they also found something else, hope not based on illusion, but on endurance. The hunger that wakes and the spirit of the wild vanished again into the borderlands. But behind them, Varnak no longer pretended. And the wind that swept through the domes did not carry silence, it carried voices. Steady and rising. Title: The Silent Storm. Year: 114,102,563.7. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the shadowed, branched alleys of Ondath, beneath skies perpetually stained red from the distant Bloodstone Mountains, the silent storm moved unnoticed, a whisper in a city that no longer listened. Cloaked in hues of twilight, he drifted through marketplaces and over rooftops with steps lighter than the dawn wind. He sought truths hidden beneath layers of willful ignorance, truths buried in the silence of those who suffered quietly. At the heart of Ondath stood a towering edifice of marble and obsidian, the Hall of Prosperity, gleaming opulently amidst squalor and despair. It was here the city's elite gathered, oblivious or uncaring to the famine and destitution sprawling just beyond their opulent feasts. A single lantern hung from a distant window, its flame a muted protest against darkness. The silent storm paused beneath it, listening. This lantern marked a plea, the desperate cry of the marginalized whose voices were silenced by wealth and apathy. "You cannot erase the past, but you can stop giving it your present," he whispered, reciting the ancient creed passed through generations. It was both a reminder and a warning. Chapter 2. Within the lavish chambers of the Hall of Prosperity, decadence reigned. Laughter echoed through halls filled with silk, spices, and music, a heavy perfume masking an undercurrent of rot. To the city's rulers, Ondath was a paradise, their opulence built upon countless unseen backs. Tonight, however, their laughter faltered. An intruder had breached the sacred walls, one whose mere presence stirred whispers and unease. At the center of the grand hall, the silent storm stood, his presence heavy with accusation, though he said nothing. A solitary figure, cloaked and silent, facing an assembly that pretended blindness to suffering. "Who dares disrupt our peace?" demanded Lord Kedros, his voice trembling with indignation. "I disrupt nothing," replied the silent storm. Peace disrupted itself when you closed your doors to the cries outside. Murmurs spread among the gathering. The unease grew palpable. Gator sneered, emboldened by the presence of his guards. "And what truth do you bring that we do not already know?" The silent storm raised a hand. From his sleeve fell dozens of small tokens, locks of hair, scraps of cloth, trinkets belonging to the city's forgotten citizens. They scattered across the polished marble floor like silent accusations. "Each represents a voice you silenced," he said softly. "They deserve acknowledgement." The silence that followed was deafening, and within it the weight of countless unspoken words pressed heavily upon the gathered elite. Chapter 3. By dawn, the city had changed, not by decree or bloodshed, but by a sudden awareness, a collective awakening sparked by the silent storm's silent plea. His actions had stirred a conscience long dormant within Ondath's people. The forgotten were remembered. Their plights echoed in whispered conversations and furtive glances toward the now questioned pillars of prosperity. At the city gates, the silent storm stood ready to depart, his presence unnoticed amidst the growing crowd. Beside him was the Hunter of Night, a mysterious figure who guarded the city's secrets with unwavering vigilance. "You believe this will hold?" the Hunter asked, eyes glinting with doubt and hope. "I believe awareness is a beginning," replied the silent storm. "What they do next defines them." The Hunter watched as the silent storm disappeared into the horizon, leaving behind only questions and a newly awakened city. Ondath, once blind to its cruelty, now faced a choice: to confront the uncomfortable truths it had ignored, or risk falling back into the shadows from which it had momentarily emerged. In the quiet spaces between daybreak and dusk, the city waited, knowing the silent storm's words to be true. You cannot erase the past, but you can stop giving it your present. Title: The Tear Catcher. Year: 113,974,358.8. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the drought-bleached village of Cern, where laughter had become brittle and wells coughed dust, there lived a woman known only as the Tear Catcher. She wore no crown, held no sway, and yet all knew her name. Her jars, scattered across the village, caught more than rain, they caught sorrow, and with it truth. The child came during the dry seasons, cruelest, weak, small, silent, eyes full of horizon. She said nothing, but her presence shifted something in the wind. The villagers called her the Child of Drought, half curse, half prophecy. The Tear Catcher welcomed her with open arms. "Obstacles do not block the path," she whispered to the girl one night. "They sculpt it into something worthy." Chapter 2. The village council, cloistered and dry in heart as the land, debated endlessly how to fix the water crisis. They ignored those who tilled the fields, those who stitched torn sandals, those who carried grief like a second skin. The Tear Catcher began gathering not just terrors, but stories. Each jar was sealed with the tale of someone overlooked: a grandmother whose well was poisoned, a child who never saw rain, a weaver who bartered thread for drops. The Child of Drought followed silently, recording every word with chalk on the bones of dried trees. One evening, the Tear Catcher delivered the jars to the council. "Listen," she said, "not to me, to them." Chapter 3. The council scoffed, but the people gathered. Jars were opened. Cries echoed, not of complaint, but of memory, of perseverance, of injustice ignored too long. The Child of Drought stood and finally spoke. Her voice was wind-cracked and warm. "If you do not listen to those who endure most, then your solutions will always fall short." A hush fell over Cern. From that night forward, the council circle expanded. Voices once silenced were welcome. Resource plans shifted. Seeds were shared. Water found not by chance, but by choice. The Tear Catcher and the child walked the outskirts less often, their jars filling slower, but they remained quiet and watchful. For justice, like water, flowed best when no voice was damned. Title: The Stranger Who Remembers. Year: 113,846,173.5. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the sun-bleached deserts beyond Ondath, where ancient paths etched memories into sand, a stranger walked unrecognized by those he remembered vividly. Known as the Stranger Who Remembers, he carried in his quiet case the histories and sorrows of countless souls, burdened by the whispers that only hearts could perceive. At dusk he reached the city of Meran, famed for its towering gates of bronze etched with tales of valor and loss. Yet the gates remained closed, a stubborn refusal of passage to outsiders. Meran had grown fearful of the unfamiliar, its streets heavy with suspicion and closed doors. The stranger rested his hand upon the bronze gate, feeling its warmth fade with the twilight. He whispered gently to it, The heart whispers long before the mind grants permission. As if moved by compassion or curiosity, the gates creaked open softly, letting the stranger pass unnoticed into the heart of a city that feared his kind. Chapter 2. Inside Amaran, the stranger witnessed a city divided districts partitioned by invisible walls of misunderstanding and distrust. Each quarter harbored different traditions, held separate feasts, and spoke in tongues of quiet hostility about their neighbors. Once renowned for unity, Amaran had forgotten how to embrace the richness of differing perspectives. In the bustling markets filled with vivid silks and fragrant spices, the stranger stopped at the stall of the thorn-gilded, a wise woman draped in veils of deep green, her hands encircled with bracelets of thorn gold. "You carry many voices," she observed without looking up, "yet none seem your own." "The voices of many become one when you listen closely enough," he replied gently. She raised her eyes then, sensing something long forgotten. "And why have you come?" "To help Amaran remember," he replied. "A city cannot flourish by closing doors and ears." Chapter 3. That evening, a gathering was held in the central plaza, its invitation whispered by curiosity and caution. Citizens from each district arrived hesitantly, observing each other warily. At the center stood the stranger who remembers, and beside him the thorn-gilded. One by one, citizens shared their stories, tales of joy, loss, hope, and despair. Each voice echoed through the plaza, dissolving barriers with shared empathy and mutual respect. The stranger listened carefully, nodding as each tale unfolded, guiding Amaran gently toward reconciliation. When the last voice faded into silence, the thorn-gilded stepped forward, her voice clear and firm. "Respect begins with remembrance," she declared. "Remember not only your own joys and sorrows, but those of your neighbor, for only then can true stability and prosperity endure." As the plaza emptied, now filled with thoughtful quiet rather than suspicion, the stranger turned to leave. "Where will you go?" the thorn-gilded asked softly. "To remember others," he replied, walking toward the distant horizon. Behind him, the gates of bronze remained open, awaiting all who wished to remember what the heart already knew could be true. Dino, the clown who cries starfire. Year 113,717,948.5. Era Bloodstone Age. Author Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The city of Jeremy was famed for its splendor domes of opal, streets paved with brass, and towers that reached beyond the clouds. Yet among this jewel-toned glory, laughter rang hollow, and celebration felt rehearsed. In the center square performed the clown who cries starfire. His act dazzled. Tears of liquid light, tricks pulled from stardust, and a voice that could echo both joy and sorrow in the same breath. He was the city's favorite marvel and its loneliest. Each evening he returned not to gold lion halls, but to a narrow loft above the Hall of Echoes, where silence pressed heavy. His only companion was a melody, a song without source, an ethereal tune that haunted the wind, reminding him of something longed for but never grasped. "When you speak your full truth," he whispered into the night, "the stars hold their breath." Chapter 2. The festival of wealth approached. Jeremy would crown its richest citizen bearer of legacy, a title worshipped more than earned. The clown was invited to perform, but this time he hesitated. He had found a crack in the foundation. Deep beneath the city's treasury, he'd uncovered vaults of memories, sealed away emotions, raw and unspoken, belonging to those who had traded feeling for riches. Love letters never sent, cares never shed, dreams never pursued. He showed one to the song without source, who now appeared as a ghostly muse, half sound, half form. "You found what was lost," she said. "But will they listen?" "They don't need to listen," the clown replied. "They need to feel." Chapter 3. The night of the festival arrived. The clown's stage was set beneath the starfall arch, surrounded by nobles and merchants cloaked in emerald and pride. He stepped forward not to perform, but to weep. Each tear released and memory laughter repressed, grief ignored, longing denied. The crowd gasped as the vaults within them cracked. One by one the illusion shattered. A merchant collapsed, sobbing into a cloak embroidered with his wife's forgotten face. A noble sang a lullaby he hadn't heard since childhood. The song without source filled the air, weaving emotion into every corner of the city. Jeremy changed that night, not to revolt, but revelation. The clown vanished afterward. Some say he became the wind. Others say he walks among us still, seeking starfire in forgotten hearts. The song remains, and Jeremy now remembers. Material success may shine, but without emotional truth, even stars grow cold. Title: The Boundless Listener. Year: 113,589,743.2. Era Bloodstone Age. Author Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. On the outskirts of Ondath, where shadows clawed at lanterns and whispers crept like nightmares along cracked stone streets, lived the boundless listener. No face ever clearly glimpsed, no voice ever distinctly heard, only an unsettling presence felt deeply within the marrow of the city. Some said the listener was a myth, born from fear. Others claimed he was real, a spirit damned to endlessly absorb humanity's sorrow. Tonight, the listener moved through undeath's tangled alleys with a purpose drawn by a whisper of hope amidst overwhelming despair. Beneath a shattered street lamp, a girl wept silently, her tears pooling softly on stones that had forgotten the warmth of kindness. "You are not here to play small in someone else's comfort zone," he murmured, stepping from the shadows. She looked up, startled yet unafraid. "Who are you?" "A listener," he replied gently, "and tonight I hear you." Chapter 2. The girl, whose name was Sora, guided the listener through the winding streets to a forgotten district where poverty was the only stable force. Amid the decaying houses stood the Spiral Tower, an ancient structure feared by locals, said to imprison a malevolent spirit, the Spiral Keeper. The stone walls twisted upward grotesquely, defying natural order, and radiated the pervasive dread. Inside, the Keeper waited, trapped by the spiraled curse, yet able to sense every cruelty and kindness within undeath. He fed on pain, despair, and the hollowness of hearts. Yet, strangely, he also longed for the warmth denied by his monstrous existence. "What kindness can hope to enter here?" the Keeper hissed as the listener stepped through the doorway. "One small act can unravel even your endless spiral," the listener answered calmly. Chapter 3. The boundless listener ascended the Spiral Tower, passing through chambers echoing with cries long faded, each wall engraved with stories of forgotten suffering. Finally, he faced the Keeper, a figure of twisted smoke and darkness, bound by invisible chains of torment. "You cannot heal what is forever broken," the Keeper whispered bitterly. "I am not here to heal you," replied the listener, "only to listen and let you know someone cares." The Keeper fell silent, absorbing the listener's unwavering presence, a small, simple act of pure compassion offered without fear or condition. Gradually, the Keeper's twisted form softened, its edges blurring gently into the darkness. The chains binding him shattered silently, replaced by something intangible yet undeniably present: acceptance. Outside, the Spiral Tower slowly unwound, releasing its grip on the district. Dawn broke over Aneth, and the small kindness offered by the listener spread subtly but inexorably throughout the city. The boundless listener moved on quietly, carrying within him the whispers of countless souls, knowing now more than ever that small acts, given sincerely, could transform worlds, even worlds built on fear. Title: The Masked Midwife of Becoming. Year: 113,461,538.2. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the town of Barrack, nothing was ever said outright. Citizens communicated in gestures, metaphors, and suspiciously long silences. Even declarations of love were delivered in the form of choreographed sneezes. The more mysterious one seemed, the higher their standing. Naturally, this made it difficult to get anything done. At the edge of this nonsense lived the masked midwife of becoming, a woman known more for pulling truth from people like splinters than for delivering babies. Her mask changed with her mood: a goat for sarcasm, a trout for offense, and a turnip for triumph. When she encountered the one who drinks shadow, a bard whose humor had once sparked revolts and indigestion, she sensed an ancient wound covered by layers of comedic deflection. Her highest offering, she told him, adjusting her mask to skeptical broccoli, lies buried beneath your oldest wound. He responded with a pie to her face. She approved. Chapter 2. Barrack's mayor announced a transparency festival, clearly having misunderstood the concept. Everyone was required to wear class clothing and sing confessions at breakfast. The town panicked. The shadow drinker and the midwife were summoned to manage the mood. Instead, they decided to embrace chaos. The bard wrote a satirical operetta titled "Who Ate My Feelings?", while the midwife distributed masks inscribed with everyone's unspoken truths. "You can't hide behind what you're literally wearing," she chirped, adjusting her bead-shaped mask. Confessions began flying: adulteries, forgotten debts. That time old Merla faked her own disappearance just to avoid her mother-in-law. Laughter erupted. Tears followed, then laughter again. Truth, it seemed, could be absurd. Chapter 3. In the aftermath of honesty induced bedlam, something unexpected happened. People trusted each other more, with secrets spilled and oddities embraced. Barrack functioned better. Deals were fairer. Arguments became debates. A bakery war was resolved with a pun contest. The bard, now openly grieving a lost sibling he once joked about endlessly, played sincere songs by night and absurd jingles by morning. The midwife, maskless for the first time in decades, admitted she had no idea what she was doing most of the time. The town roared with approval. Transparency didn't destroy Derek, it freed it. And every spring they held the festival again, not for shame, but celebration, because when truth weighs a turnip, even your deepest wounds can dance.